How long have you been doing this?
So I've been doing this for about 18 months.
Oh, nice.
Did we press record? Yeah, we're recording. No, that's good. So I've been doing this for about 18 months, the podcast. So within the BTS Creative Academy, I chart the lives and journeys of creatives in different fields.
Awesome.
Whether that's artists, whether that's storytellers, actors, directors, writers, many different things. So podcast has been all the way to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and now it's at a Think Bubble comic book festival. But yeah, 18 months in, enjoying the journey, meeting so many fantastic people. So thank you for joining me on the podcast today, David.
No, thank you for asking me.
Yeah, no, this is wonderful to have you here. So as we get into the podcast, before we start, I'd just like to say this episode is sponsored by Supernova Media. They look to support creatives in their endeavours, and they've brought me here to Thought Bubble, which I'm very grateful for. So thank you, Supernova Media. But let's get into you, David.
Yes.
Tell me, what brings you here to Thought Bubble?
So I've always wanted to come to Thought Bubble. I've been involved in and around in comics for a long time, and this has been one of the shows where I hear about it so much that it's just been on my list, from Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey DJing the dances to the amazing floor. And this year, I have a comic out called Time Waits from DSTLRY. It's a 3-issue miniseries, 48 pages each. It's written by myself and Chip Zdarsky together, drawn by Marcus Toe and Marvin Sienna Parr, colored by Matt Wilson, lettered by Ariana Marr, and edited by Allison O'Toole. It's kind of a sci-fi crime action story, and our second issue came out last week. And the best con for the Chip, Marcus, and I to meet at was Thought Bubble. It's all three of our first trip to this show. Chip has been to the UK to other shows. I think Marcus as well. It's my first trip to the UK, so I'm very excited to be here.
How are you finding it? How are you finding the journey? How are you finding the UK so far?
It's a bit cold. Yeah. I should have expected. I thought I packed pretty well, but I live in California, and there's I was not prepared as well as I could have been. But the people have been great. The
Wonderful
views are amazing, even just out of this window.
You've come to a good part of the UK for views.
Yeah, very photogenic, let's say. Yeah. And the crowd at Thought Bubble has been very flattering. I don't think of myself as like a big name creator or anything like that. Like, I've done a lot of different things in comics, but it's always very validating when people have known me from my time before I was writing comics, when I was a comics critic or a proofreader, editor. I've worn a lot of hats, everything but artist at this point.
So take me back. Let's go back then with your journey, David. Let's go back to the start, before you're launching your own comic at the moment. But before all this started for you, you touched on there you were as a critic early on. So it was that the beginning of kind of like your creative career for you, being a critic? Yeah,
very much so. I was briefly an art student in high school. I realized writing was much easier, and stopped drawing, which I very much regretted and have been getting back the past few years. But one of the core things of writing for me was taking art very seriously. Like, not just being like, is this comic good or bad? It's like, what's good about it? What's bad about it? Like, what kind of little tricks are the creators using to do their storytelling? So in 2005, I founded a blog called Fourth Letter with an exclamation point, and the fourth letter is D for David. And it was a group blog with me, my friend Gavin, Thomas, Esther, and a few other people. We kind of got together for almost 10 years. We just wrote about comics whenever we liked. And it expanded from just comics to also comics and wrestling, comics and music, comics and movies, and it eventually became us growing up in public, learning how to write in public. And I joke that it made me very good at reading comics. So when Image Comics needed a proofreader, which they'd never had one in 30 years, they needed someone to basically catch all of the typos that were slipping through. They were like, David reads pretty closely. Maybe he can help us out there. So I was hired on at Image Comics in 2013, I believe. And from there, I was the guy who read every Image comic looking for mistakes. And that gave me a body of knowledge to run their panels at conventions. So I met a lot of artists, and when you meet an artist and you notice something in their work and you tell them, they remember you. Like, they trust that you're actually on the ball instead of just doing like empty marketing speak, like, oh, your stuff is so cool, I'd love to get it tattooed. I'd be like, no, like, this technique you're using here, like, let's dig into that.
Yes.
And I ended up getting a very good reputation from those. I was doing 50 panels a year at one point. It was very ludicrous. But the friendships I made there, like people like Chip Zdarsky, I sustained after I left Image. I work at Viz Media now, editing Japanese manga. So I've gone from kind of talking about how comics were good, helping make comics good, to now directly affecting how good the comics are. Like,
that's a really interesting arc that you have there, because there is a danger, isn't there, with you, where you're being critical, that you could rub people up the wrong way.
Oh, I definitely did.
You definitely did.
Yeah,
but yet you don't feel like that's hindered you?
I think I used to think it hindered me a lot. The older I've gotten, the more I've realized that it just means that I'm more closely aligned with people who are closer to my values. Like, there's always going to be someone who dislikes you. You know, you kind of can't help it. People rub people the wrong way for whatever reason. And I always made sure, like, I've been in my fair share of fights, but I try to keep it always about the work. So it's not like you're a bad person for doing this. It's like, this story wasn't that great. Here's why. And if you choose to read it, then that's on you. But I think because I was always kind of straightforward with it, I didn't turn into a villain necessarily.
Yes, yeah. I wonder if me and you kind of align a little bit here, because I'm considering something myself at the moment where I'm being invited to things like this. People are asking for my opinion, and I'm being very careful to give it. In the sense of I can understand the power of positivity and negativity, and this is a space that I want to be invited into. So I'm being cautious, and I'm considering that I like to think of myself as more of a commentator than a critic. I almost kind of feel like it's not really my place to pass judgment on the art.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. My perspective is that anything is fair game, which isn't always great. Like, depending on the kind of post you're writing, the stature of the person that you're talking about, like, you could really hurt someone if you say the wrong thing. It takes a lot of work for any creator to get out there and put their thing out into the world.
And so that's what I'm cautious of, that I don't want to hinder that. I don't want to stop that.
I met a guy yesterday. He was like, hey, could you give me a quick portfolio review? I brought some sample pages. And I was like, yes, but I can't give you that hard-hitting, like, only negative comments portfolio review. I'm going to tell you what you're good at, but I don't know you well enough to tell you what you're bad at yet. And there are other, like Marcus Toe, who I'm sitting next to, he was much better at finding visual storytelling tips for this artist, while mine was more about noticing what he was doing well. Like, he had an approach to, he showed me black and white comics, essentially, with kind of tones. And I was like, oh, if you did spot color, just red, this would look like a proper horror story. And I could kind of see his face go like, oh, yeah, I could actually, like, pull that off a little bit. So for me, it's often about finding the potential. And I believe in the compliment sandwich. Like, say a good thing, say the difficult thing, and then say the good thing at the end. Because, like you say, it's hard work.
In the UK, we call it a shit sandwich. A loaf of bread, but they put the shit in the middle.
It's like how criticism desperately needs a new name. Like, it sounds bad, even though it's it can be holistic. You know, because I think that everything is bad to somebody. You know, there's 7 billion people in the world. You can't win them all. But at the same time, everything is good to somebody. And if you can pull out what's good, even if it's not personally to my taste, if I can talk about how they do something well that I don't like, then someone who does like it will be like, oh, well, this guy's full of crap. I should go buy this. So it kind of works both ways, you know. But I do try to make sure there's like a fairness involved, or like I'm not assuming or reaching or ascribing motivations to people, you know, who haven't deserved it.
When you say ascribing motivations, do you mean like you're trying not to teach or preach?
Kind of trying not to pretend like I can read their mind. Like if I say like, oh, he made Superman do this because he secretly blah, 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 like that's pulled entirely out of my butt, you know? But if I'm like, you know, Superman doing this has this kind of knock-on effect, I think that's very different. That's more still about the story instead of the creator. Like, I make sure to always judge the story and not the person as best I can. Like, sometimes people do horrible things and it's like, well, toss that guy in the bin.
So did you consider yourself, before you got into critique then, did you consider yourself a creative in any way?
Yeah, I drew all through childhood, just, you know, like most kids. I really loved charcoals. I was a landscape, you know, that's kind of where my heart was, like kind of capturing nature, even though I didn't feel very good at it until recently. And I'm a writer, you know, in addition to criticism, I do prose, I do short stories, pretty much anything. Like, I've been branching out into video editing because it feels like an extension of my critical practice. And for me, writing comics and writing comics criticism are almost identical, because it's all about what happened in the past, what's the context of now, and what can we do that's interesting in the future. And where in criticism, I'm trying to kind of read the tea leaves and figure out what's what. In comics, I can be like, let's try this. Like, I haven't seen this influence in comics at all before. Like, in our series, Time Waits, we reference Battle Arts, which was a Japanese wrestling promotion in the 90s, professional wrestling. So it was, the outcomes were predetermined, but the fighting was a little bit more real. And I fell in love with it over the past year. And I was like, we should do an approach to violence that's more like this, where it's very intimate, but also like a quick flash. Like, it's not like super long. And in Marcus Toe, we sent it to him, and he's like, oh, man, I like grappling too. And so there's like that connection immediately where he gets it. You know, the writer team gets it, the art team gets it. And then we pass it on to the readers, and we've gotten feedback from them where they're like, yeah, the fight in the kitchen was really intense, really hardcore. So pulling those things in is a direct result of me reading so many action comics where maybe the fight scenes aren't as good, maybe they're a little old school. Like Jack Kirby, incredible artist, but he doesn't do fight scenes like someone like Jim Lee or Masashi Kishimoto, who did Naruto, would do. And everything can be good if you do it, if the execution's, proper. Hopefully. I guess we'll find out with issue 3. So kind of pulling in those influences and being aware of the greater context of comics, it all feels like the same thing to me.
Yeah, it sounds like that your world of critique has really taught you some really important lessons with how to move this forward. And in that space, when you was doing that, did you consider, there is a future for me within the industry of storytelling?
My friends did more than I did.
Really?
I was bullied into writing comics.
So they could see it?
Yeah, my friend Caleb Goldner was the first one to get me to do a script. We did a story together called Apollo Kids. He's been drawing indie comics himself. He writes Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles right now and something else for IDW. So he's been around in his own kind of world of comics. And he's like, dude, you got to give me a script so I can draw it for you. And we did a very goofy story together, and it was a lot of fun. And then my friend Nick Dragata, who's worked on Batman, Fantastic Four, he's on Absolute Batman right now, which is burning up the sales charts. He's like, so you're writing comics, huh? And he kind of wheedled in, and we did a few books together, homages to some old Japanese comics, and the fresh one called Go Back, which was sort of a street-level crime story. And that's the one where I was like, my heart is crime comics. This is the one where if I'm only going to do one, this has to be on point. And I think that we really stuck the landing. And that was the one where I was like, oh, I'm not that bad at this. I can bring something to the table.
What was it that twigged there for you? What was it that felt different at that moment?
I think seeing the finished product, Nick is obviously an incredibly talented artist. He will elevate any script that you give him. But he was so into the script that we had worked out that it felt like validation, There's this guy he's worked with, all these amazing creators. Mike Allred, he's working with Scott Snyder right now, Jonathan Hickman on East of West. And he's like, David, you got to give me a script. And I'm like, dude, I don't know how to sell comic books. I'm just some guy. I work behind the scenes. But we just clicked well. And then, Chip found out that I was writing comics, and he said, let's co-write something. Because we do a podcast together called Manga Splaining, where we explain manga. Another critical practice thing.
Okay.
It's like a book club that we put on the internet. And Chip Zdarsky and I have a lot in common. We like a lot of the same things. So the story is kind of a merger of us two. So it's another thing where it's very validating, where it's like, oh, the things that I'm into are actually things people want to read about or things people care about. I believe you can feel passion, essentially.
I wonder, you mentioned there you do your own podcast as well, and you're doing this critical thinking and analysing things within that. And there's something that I'm definitely learning through doing this. Every person that I sit down with is expanding on the things that I want to do creatively. I want to write. I've failed a lot at that in the past.
Yeah.
But having spoken to so many writers now, I'm inspired to move forward. And I've found some solutions to my writing that I couldn't discover before. So it sounds to me like you're doing the same.
Yeah, I love learning. I'm a college dropout. I got a 2-year degree. Then I was like, okay, I've had enough. I'm not very good at this.
Yeah.
But
and what was it at that time? So for me, I was also a college dropout.
So you get it.
And so I get it. When I was younger, I hated learning.
Yeah.
It just wasn't working for me in that classroom environment. But at this point in my life, it's every day I can't wait to wake up and learn something new and discover something new.
I think that's a great habit to have because there is, to get on a very high horse for a moment. There's so much beauty in the world. It's sometimes very hard, very frustrating being alive, but there is so much to enjoy, whether nature or other people. Our conversation here, learning from each other is very interesting. I love having conversations like this over podcasts, over, tea in person, whatever. There's a lot I don't know, and there's a lot that I'm good at. And I would like to be good at a little more, Yeah. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be the best. I don't think I'll ever be a great artist. But I've been drawing on my own time to get back the feeling I had when I was a kid, Quitting art in high school was a dumb idea. I realize that now. It was a very 16-year-old decision.
Why was it dumb to? Because you wouldn't. I'm looking at this at this point you are in your career now.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be at this point, and you wouldn't be moving forward if you hadn't have done things in a certain way. So why do you feel like that was a silly thing to do?
I think I could have done both. I think having the background in art made me a better critic by far, because I was very focused on art at a point when my peers were more focused on the story. Like Fourth Letter started in 2005. It was like the come up of Brian Bendis at Marvel Comics. There was the Ultimate Comics. It was all very writer driven, and it's still a very writer driven industry. But I was like, the pictures are the good part though. Like, it's all good, but like the pictures, like that's what we get on T-shirts. It's, you know, what people get tattooed.
Yeah.
We got to talk about the drawings as if they were the writing. And I could use my background in art to kind of power that. And I think that made me respect the art side of it a lot more. And it changed how we approach scripting. It changes how I approach even just, you know, asking for an edit on a page. Like, I know it's going to take an artist X amount of time to do it. Like, it's sometimes messed up to say, like, hey, do your job over again. I know it took you 8 hours to do this the first time, but like, can we see a second draft? You know, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So you have to pay attention. You have to learn. And I think that the more you learn about things, it doesn't get easier, because you realize there are so many different things to, like on podcasting alone, like background noise, clicks. I have Invisalign, so there will probably be a little like hissing on the mic.
Oh, well, with this, I've made so many mistakes along the way, and there's even some of these episodes that I've put out in the past, this thing's not working. I used microphones that were cheap.
Yes.
That I was like, I can buy them in TikTok shop for £4. they'll do. But then when I took them out into the world, they didn't perform. But I'm still sharing those failures.
Yes.
Because it's important that we're not here today
Yeah.
in that same place. We're learning from them.
Perfection is a fake idea. I truly believe that. I have also a real life example for you. I've been exploring YouTube videos, trying to do video essays. And I've done a few good ones. I'm maybe like an hour and a half worth of videos now across 4 videos. On Friday night, I found out about the Essential Sound tab in Adobe Premiere. And whenever I record, I always have to boost my audio a bunch, and it's always kind of up and down. This did it for me, and it was perfect. I could have been doing this the whole time.
Yes, yeah.
But I think because I did it the hard way, I've got a better understanding of how to manipulate my voice in audio. Because I'm all learning, you know, this is all self-taught. I'm not. I'll go to, you know, I'll watch maybe a YouTube video here and there, but I'm mostly trying to do it by doing it. Same way you learn how to draw by drawing. Like, if you have to draw a person, you got to draw 10,000 people first. You know, you have to get your practice in. So I think failing is probably the most important part of being a creative person. If you can't take failure, you're not going to get anywhere.
No.
Like,
and,
you don't.
And I took that. I considered up until a few years recently that everything I was doing, I was a failure.
Yeah.
But I took that in the hard way for a period of time. Whereas now, and I reflect on all them things that didn't work, I'm like, no, they were me just learning and just moving forward. And actually, I can celebrate those things now.
It's a thing that got you here. There's a manga, a Japanese comic I like a lot by Takehiko Inoue called Real, and it's about wheelchair basketball, people who've lost the use of their legs or various, their spine or something like that. And essentially, it's a drama about people trying to find joy in life again. And there's a character whose father left him when he was a child. They have a very horrible relationship, and his father comes back when his son is injured. And the dad is like, you know, those years I was not here weren't a waste. I was getting to a point where I could take care of you again. And I'm reading this, I'm, you know, like bawling, like the art's beautiful. Like the father's holding his son's basketball and like thinking and holding it to his head. And it's like so deep. And it's absolutely true. Like, everything you've done before now got you here. And hopefully, you know, even though life is hard, even though we go through a lot, hopefully that gave you something like a firm foundation to build on.
Yes, yeah.
At least perspective, like you're talking about. Like, it sounds like you found a lot of perspective through doing things like this.
And the foundation is so important, and the foundation can start at any point. And I consider I've got hopes of what I'm doing with podcasting for the future and how I'd like this to evolve into a talk show.
Yeah,
it is hopes and dreams for the future. But I consider a lot of the early episodes as the foundation work, as the starting again, and I look at it like I'm building a house.
Yeah.
And you've got to get that foundation right before you lay any bricks.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, when you start to put the bricks up, it's all going to sink and it's going to crumble if you haven't got that base level there. And you can start that at I'm 40 now, and
Same.
so you can start that at this point. It doesn't have to start when you're young.
Yeah, and if you involve something you liked when you were young, I think might be easier to fail.
Yes, yeah.
Because it's not, when you start something as an adult, you're with an adult mind. Like, I got to get this right. Like, I have to make rent. I've got relationships.
We can start to feel like time. The clock is ticking.
Yes.
Part of the midlife crisis
I
thing.
love thinking about death. But if
so you're 40 as well.
Yeah, I turned 40 last year.
Oh, okay. So you're looking good. I wouldn't have guessed
No,
that.
it's both of us. This is a very handsome panel right now.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I got the grey hairs. You're not really doing the grey.
Yeah, I got a little bit.
One or two.
I started going grey in high school, believe it or not.
You?
I got little sprinkles because my grandfather went grey very early, and kind of down here at the bottom of the neck too. But for some reason, in sunlight, they don't show up. So I feel like I'm like the daywalker of grey hair.
Well, I blame each individual grey hair on my daughter.
Oh, that makes sense. I have no kids.
Yeah, she caused each and every one of these grey hairs, and she knows that.
And even the age thing, you think 40. When I was in high school, 40 was impossibly old, of course. 30 was impossibly old.
Yeah.
Now that I'm here,
you're like, wow, how young are we?
Yeah,
aren't we?
It's endless possibilities. Like, we're in much better shape than the previous generation, I truly feel. Like, fewer cigarettes, better diet, just better life, quality of life overall. Like, we live longer now, and we look better as we live longer. And I think looking better is a symptom of actually being more healthy. So we can spend the time to draw or to study new things or to try something, fail, and decide we don't want to do it anymore. As long as we have that time, of course.
Well, yeah, you touched on that, on the death thing. So
yeah,
at this point, I know how I've coped and dealt with that, and not always very well.
Yeah.
How has that influence in your work? Because I know for me, when I wasn't dealing with it well, it made me very stagnant, and I was in a place that I couldn't move forward because I was actually very, very fearful of death, and I felt it following over me. And at one point, my wife was very ill and she had cancer, and so I was looking after her, but death was just following me around everywhere. And in that time, I was incapable of doing anything creative.
For me,
where are you in your life? Because I think we all go through that.
Yeah. No, my first grandparent died in 2015, and I was a mess. It was pretty bad. And for the next several years, actually, I had at least one funeral a year. And I live with depression. Like, it's a thing that I've been working with, depression and anxiety. And it did ruin me. But one thing that I was grateful for was that I'd spent so much time writing about comics that it was actually an escape. Like, doing criticism, doing creative things was like a chance to, I call it crystallizing my thoughts. Like, I have this cloud above my head where I'm thinking all these things. When I write it, it becomes real. And sometimes writing it meant like writing down exactly how I felt, like just doing like teenage diary style. Like, I feel bad today. I feel bad because of this, this, and this. And like actually saying it helps me get my arms around it. And I think that nowadays, now that I'm older, a lot of my work and a lot of my friends' work is kind of about climate change. Like, trouble's coming, trouble's here, trouble's very much here. And that's another like aspect of death. It's like the death of society, the death of culture, the death of the world. What happens after everything we know is gone. But for me personally, I've been trying to think about death as something natural that everyone goes through.
Of course, because it is.
Yeah,
we can't
avoid
it. Escape it. And a friend of mine just passed away a couple of days ago.
Oh, sorry.
And it's, I'm still I'm still wrestling with that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that I had a very bad period of time with that subject, but now I'm a bit freer. But it's still something to work on.
Yeah, it'll always hurt. And the thing I've been trying to tell myself is that when someone dies, they've left behind a beautiful life. Like, when my grandmother passed away, like, I'm her sole grandkid. She's got a few other kids. Like, it's a beautiful family. Like, we have such great memories. Like, everything that happened matters so much. And even though they're gone and they're not here anymore, the things that I'm doing now is because of what they showed me. Like, it's similar to the foundation we talked about earlier. Like, having my grandmother in the back of my head and knowing, like, I get red hair on the back of my neck like she did. That's family stuff, gray hair from my maternal grandfather, red hair from my paternal grandmother.
Wow.
There's all these.
It's almost like these things that happened to you in the past, they're echoing on.
Always.
And so, like, and this has helped me with death, that actually no one ever truly dies. Like, I'm thinking about my friend now that I've mentioned him.
Yeah.
And I always remember the way he would laugh at everything. And actually that continuing to echo now.
Yeah.
And he was the type of person that would always give you a hug and give you a grab and smile at you. And at points in my life where I wasn't feeling like I wanted to do that, when someone embraces you like that, you can't help but to feel good.
It's true. It's sort of So editing podcasts takes very long, as I'm sure you know.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
a little
yeah.
tedious.
Yeah.
But with our podcast, I'm spending 4 or 5 hours editing audio of my friends laughing and having a good time. So it's
Yeah.
hard to be down when you're hearing so much laughter. Like my therapist has said, like when you're laughing, you're not anxious.
So why do you take that out?
I leave it in. The
You leave
laughter
it in?
stuff,
Oh, good, good,
I'm,
good,
I'm
good.
listening to it as I
Ah,
edit. and
yes,
it's like
yeah.
kind
Oh,
of keeping me going.
Oh, see, I was concerned that you were taking that out. So I leave as much in as possible. In fact, I call most of these episodes uncut.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love it.
Because I tidy up the beginning, I tidy up the end, but in the middle there, no matter what happens or where we go,
Yeah.
it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the experience.
Yeah, very much so. Like I try to get a clean sound and flow for our show, but leaving in certain little things, like I said, I just said for instance.
Yes, yeah.
I usually cut those out.
Do you? Okay.
And I actually started speaking differently. I'll like extend my vowels instead of saying So I'll say I think blah 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 as a way of getting around the edit. But I don't know. I just like it to sound like a conversation between friends, and laughter is such an important part of that, especially with comic books. Not that they're all funny, but like the things you say to each other about them or the realizations that your friends have. Sometimes it's funny, and like the first thing is like a sharp laugh, and then you get it, and then you have a deep conversation about it.
Yeah, in some ways, comic books are a little bit like a podcast, aren't they?
Yeah.
That way that we're kind of looking into a space that we're kind of like that fly on the wall, aren't
And
we? When
they're
we
both
read a
better
comic book?
when you can talk about them. Like listening to a podcast alone is fine. Like I enjoy learning things, but having someone to talk about the thing that I learned with, that is the best.
Yeah.
Even if they don't like it. I say one of my favorite things is to meet someone who hates a book that I love, because I know why it's good. Tell me why it's bad, and let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
And that's very risky. Some people really don't like that conversation. But like I'm curious.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think some people shy away from that?
It's almost a test of identity. Almost like, I can't like a bad
You're
book.
judging them.
Yeah.
They like it, therefore you don't, or you
Yeah.
don't like me.
And my whole thing is like, there's tons of stupid things that I like, And I totally respect other people's stupid stuff too. I say it much nicer, to loosen them up. But like that kind of casual approach, like there's no right response to art. Like art can make you a better person, but liking the right art won't make you a better person, for instance. But like getting and experiencing art and like learning things will. So I don't like tie my loves to my identity that closely. Well, no, that's the wrong way to say that actually, because it is part of my identity. I appreciate getting the dissenting, like the contrasting view so much that it doesn't hurt when someone says like, I hate, Dragon Ball Z or Ninja Scroll or something like that. Because like they have every right to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I find how we do tie our identity closely to the arts that we enjoy. Have you any idea more on why that is? Why we're so closely involved and invested into let's say we're here talking about comics.
I think we live in a capitalist society, in America, the UK as well, all over the world.
We're very similar societies.
Yeah.
Many differences, but I think I think from, I don't know what it's like for you, but I think we often look to America as like a cousin.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're very, very close. We do things very, very similarly, but yet there's something different there.
Yeah.
There's definitely something different going on. And we're both doing the same with each other. Like you're looking at like the elections, for example.
Yeah.
Like, how are you running things like this? How is your society moving forward?
There's been a lot of commiserating this weekend.
But then I get you can look the same at us as well.
Yeah. And I think that I lost my thread there. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Because
we went into politics.
Yeah, exactly. Capitalism. Yes.
Yeah.
So kind of a byproduct of like being a culture where like buying things is important. It's a matter of like stature, a matter of class, sometimes even ethnicity. I think that we get used to buying things that mean things to us and having that, little totem or symbol on our shelf. And that's like our position on this subject, And it feels natural, but I think it's good to deprogram yourself of that feeling. Because maybe the guy that made it sucks, and now you've attached yourself to something that you would personally not be into, because you like the art or something like that. I think it's better to have more of a generalist view. Like, I like this for these reasons, and it speaks to me in these ways, as opposed to, I like Batman, and I will buy anything Batman. It's like, no, you gotta like be a little more discerning, I think.
How do you think that helps us then to be a bit more discerning with the things that we like, rather than just simply subscribe to, I'm a Superman fan, I'm a Batman fan?
It's easier to make rent.
Yeah.
But no, I think that you learn more about yourself when you decide what your limits are. So if you're just absorbing everything and you're like, this was good, this was just okay, chase the good. Because, like if Batman's just okay, maybe you're more of an indie comics person. Maybe you'll love and Rockets or Fraser Geeson's work back there downstairs. There's always something. And I think if you just accept what you're given, if you're just, I'm a Batman guy, that's my thing. And I love Batman. Like, I don't mean to talk about Batman.
No. But it's just an example.
Yeah. Like, actually, what it is, I'm sitting next to Chip Zdarsky, who was writing Batman up until very recently. He just left the book to make way for the new team. And the line that he has is amazing. And people have been coming up to him and saying, like, I'm a big Batman fan. Here's what I love about your run. And it's very personal. It's not just like, I consumed this, please sign it. It's always like, I appreciated like the angle you took for the character, the approach you took to the story, things like that. So even with something like Batman, there's like things you can discern, things you can like pick up on that touch your heart. And I feel like if it doesn't touch your heart, like it's not really worth reading, watching, listening to, or anything. Because it's not noise, but it's like treading water at that point.
At this point then, so you've got a fan base of people that appreciate your work.
Apparently, yeah.
What is it that brings them, do you think, that brings them into you then? I've got a good feeling that it's kind of something linked to your philosophy on life and the world, and the way that the way that your process has gone through. But what are your ideas on that? What work is it that they're coming into?
I think time waits especially, and people who listen to the manga podcast have come up and bought the book specifically because of things we said on the podcast. I think that I've done a good job of defining my taste. We have a running joke we call David genre, which is to me it makes perfect sense. It baffles our friend Deb Aoki on the podcast. But it's sort of like comics with a lot of action, comics with melancholy heroes, comics where it's like kind of a downer, but there's like a spark of something that maybe it doesn't quite get lit, but like there's a little potential of hope. And then also like psychedelic stuff. Like I love psychedelic comics. And I think because people know exactly what I like, they can measure their taste against mine.
I wonder if there's trust in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially with the manga podcast, there's, we're 117 episodes deep or something right now. I'm behind on editing, so maybe when this comes out, we'll be 117. We've done a lot of time basically telling people who we are and what we like and why. So when we say something like, oh, I'm not really into this book, they can go, I don't usually agree with David on the podcast, so I should check this out. And I think that is a fantastic reaction, because I don't want to be the arbiter of taste. I want to be the guy who is sort of like a weather vane. Like if you look at me, you can tell which way I'm pointing, and that might give you an idea of what you're into or what you want to see.
That sounds great. There's so much noise out there.
Yeah.
You're offering some stability within this space, aren't you?
Yeah, stability is a great word for it. There's a lot of hype in comics, which is, it's hard to sell comic books. We're at a comic convention, everyone with the table has a pitch, or hopefully has a pitch, or they wish they had a pitch. And sometimes people can come and give you like, they're compliments, but they're not really compliments. It's like empty praise, let's say. Like, oh, this is the best book ever, go buy it Tuesday, blah, 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 blah. If you can give someone legit praise, if you can notice something in their work and connect to it, that goes so much further.
Yeah.
And artists noticed.
Yeah, artists will notice that. Then, I had someone on the podcast this morning. I didn't kind of quite realise who he was and the comic books that he'd worked on. And he said, after we'd had the conversation, he was saying to me that he liked that I didn't know who he was. That I wasn't. He said he's been on other podcasts where they're just all sucking up to him and just all telling him how wonderful he is. And there's me sitting there going, well, tell me why you're great.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, finally, like someone's not just telling me I'm the best. They're asking me kind of to show it and prove it, and it kind of adds a bit more value.
Yeah, even when I don't like a book, I take the quality for granted. Like it's good for somebody. It's not good for me in certain specific ways, but this person who made it for an audience who's not me is what it comes down to. And I don't know, I like when people can have real conversations with artists instead of just like, what's your book about? Where is it going? Where can we buy the last issue? All right, goodbye. No, like
marketing speak. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like I want conversations.
Who wants that? Even like if you consider yourself as a consumer, who wants to
consumers
listen?
Know it's fake.
Yeah, they don't want to listen to adverts, do they?
Yeah.
Whereas we can discover something about you here today, David, that a listener might not know anything about your work and be like, oh, this guy sounds genuine. Yeah. I want to find out more, and then they discover your work from you.
Exactly, and weird is good. There's a lot where people feel compelled to tamp down who they are, because again, like society is very hard on everybody, especially the weird. but everyone's a little bit weird, I think. We all have certain things where we're like, I have to go 800 miles away to see this concert because I love this artist. I got to go buy this original art, and it'll make me a little short. I'll have to eat ramen noodles for dinner for a couple of weeks, but like I need this piece of art. That thing that you're passionate about, someone else out there is passionate too. 9 times out of 10. It hasn't fallen short for me yet, and I'm sure it'll happen one day. But like people respond to passion. I think it's important for your passion to be genuine, not just like, I know that people respond to this, so let me do it this way. It's not like putting a coin in a machine and getting a soda. It's building a personality, building charisma, basically.
Have you any idea how people get to there? Because it sounds to me like you've found that space. I'm thinking back to my childhood. I felt a little bit weird and odd and out of place. I, in fact, kind of remember back at school that I just didn't connect with anyone because everyone was into football, and I just was like, I don't enjoy it. I don't get it, and so I felt like this weird outsider. For me, it was finding theatre. I found it through accident. But once I'd found theatre, I started to find my people. How did that work for you in any... You talked about how important it is to be weird, so I'm guessing you're a bit weird as well. Yeah,
of course. My oldest set of friends I met on a fighting game forum in like the year 2000, 2001, something like that. And, we're all like obsessives of it. I was never very good at the games. I'm better now, slightly. But finding like minds like that, where we all like one thing and we bonded over that one. We bonded over our Batman, let's say. And that gave us space to be comfortable, to be weird to each other. And a complimentary, I gotta find a better word. Being comfortable enough to open ourselves and show our true selves to each other.
Yeah.
And it is very hard to
be yourself.
Like
and
you said,
being yourself being yourself isn't necessarily weird. It's not the norm.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be the norm. Like, who is telling us that we all have to like football?
Right? Like you become an adult and it's like, where did I get this idea from? And there's so many things that are fake that we grow up believing. But I think that a lot of that is because we don't have space to become ourselves. Our parents very much need us to be on like the straight and narrow path, become an engineer, like get a safe job, get retirement, blah, 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 blah. That's not going to work for everybody. I had a huge fight with my mom about becoming an engineer versus an English major. And I'm like, this one has a salary, this one is in college forever. But English was where my heart was.
And did you win the argument?
I left the country and eventually won the argument when I got a full-time job, thanks to comic books, essentially, working at Image.
But I guess that kind of argument takes time.
It does, because I had to convince her and also myself, because I was 17, 18. I was a teenager. I didn't really know what I was capable of doing. I've been very fortunate that what I've grown up to do, what my career has become, has been tied so closely with my childhood. But like I didn't chase comic books. Like I worked in video games before this. Every time I've needed to find a job, I've been very fortunate. And it just happened to be comics one day, and then comics the next time. And now it's just been comics. And I don't think there's an easy way to make that happen. You kind of have to convince yourself to have the strength to do it, convince your family that it's actually a real job. My grandfather for years was like, so when are you going to get like a real job? I'm like, I'm living in San Francisco. It's expensive here. Like, what more do you want? And having your friends there to tell you like, yeah, you're doing the right thing. Like, I want to see more of what you're doing. Like a lot of things I've made just because I thought like 1 or 2 people I know might like them. And that's a great feeling when someone connects like that.
So at this point in the conversation, then I want to specifically ask you for some advice. That if there was someone out there listening that was going through an argument, they know what they want to do, what path they want to take, but everyone around them saying no. What advice would you give to them to move forward?
I would say first, if you can afford it, find a therapist. Find someone away from you that you can talk to comfortably, openly. As much as you love your friends and family, there's still a level of performance we have for them. Like I don't want my mom to know that like I'm, staring at the ceiling in my bed, waiting to get out of bed. But a therapist is a separate person who can give you extra context. And even though they might not be able to tell you like, hey, your art is good, they can tell you like, whether or not your feelings about it are healthy. Because if you think of your art as a burden to yourself, like you're never going to get anywhere. That is just going to drag you down. So kind of once you have, like the therapist thing, if you can't get a therapist, find a way to get yourself into a good headspace. Whether it's avoiding negativity, or being very self-indulgent, I think is very important. Because if you're not going to be like the sicko that you need, no one else will. So you got to, draw the thing that you want. Mostly, I think my advice is trust yourself to find an audience rather than trying to find an audience. Because if you get online, you're like, hey, follow me, I make art. People aren't really going to follow you. But if you kind of make a habit of putting out cool pieces every couple of weeks, you're like, this is what I love. Here's a quick piece. Here's like one I took a little bit longer on. People will notice, and you'll get added. You kind of build through word of mouth that way. I don't think there's, unfortunately, no surefire way, to make it. But I think if you approach it a certain way, if you focus on building rather than the destination, it'll be a lot easier to get your house finished.
You touched on social media there, the whole follow me thing.
Yeah.
I think the landscape for that is changing, and the
Very
perspective on that. My daughter's 16 and she's a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her, when are you going to start putting stuff on social media? She's like, I don't want to. I want to
Yeah.
be a musician. I don't want to be on
Exactly.
social media. And we had this little period of time recently where everyone in every art form felt like they had to do everyone please follow me, hit like and subscribe. And it's like, that doesn't have to be what we're doing here.
It's true. Yeah, I've been, I mentioned quitting drawing and picking it up again. I was taking drawing classes for the past couple of years, and I mostly don't put those online. I show things to friends. It's actually my third piece of advice: have something for yourself. Have something you keep back that you don't share with other people except the people you love. Because like drawing for me is so special, and I'm not afraid to show it to people. Like I've got my notebook downstairs. If someone asks, I'll show it to them. But I don't put it online because I want it to be that personal connection. I want to see my friend's face when they're flipping through, they see something horrible that I drew or something like that. And because that silos off that bit of creativity. It can't be affected by social media. It can't be affected by the critics of the world. We can't get to you. Yeah. It's just yours. And having something that's just yours is very important, because there are so many things now where you create a thing, you sell it to someone else, and they make $1 billion off of it. That is like the original sin of comic books. And that's why I think it's important to have your own thing, to own your work as much as you can, to make sure you control your work as much as you can. And you'll likely get paid less because you have that control, but you're not beholden to anyone. It's entirely yours. And when it's yours, the feelings are different. And I think that the satisfaction is off the charts. I've got time weights downstairs that we're selling, and it's published by DSTLRY, who's also sponsoring part of Thought Bubble. But as much as I love that, and I love Chip and Marcus and the rest of the team, I did this small book called Go Back with Nick Dragata that talked about the crime story. We drew that ourselves, we printed that ourselves, and the copies that I had this weekend, like I paid for. I got this company in Arizona to print it and ship it to me, and I flew it over myself. And that's like my heart. Like that is my joy, because this is the thing that we did that like maybe nobody likes it. Who knows? We're just putting it out there ourselves and seeing what happens, and people respond to it. Time Waits has like a marketing team behind it. They do like stuff on Instagram and hire influencers or whatever. So they're convincing people, while Nick and I are kind of presenting ourselves and saying, hey, take a look at us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing the work's different to sharing it with the audience, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Doing it's very lonely, even though maybe you're working in a duo or with friends, because you're just in your head. Like you're trying to make it the best you can, so you're reading it over and over and over until the words don't feel like words anymore. And this is true of my day job as well, editing manga. You read a book 4 or 5 times before it goes to press, and you just pray that like you don't get like that eye blindness where you start missing things that are wrong. But doing it yourself is just almost, I don't know, it feels good. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much value in that—that's past the monetary.
The experience, that's actually a good point.
And the life that
Yeah.
it's providing you from being here. Yes, we need the money to fuel us and to keep the thing going forward, but
I've met people here who've been reading me I started my blog 2005. It's almost 20 years now. They've been reading me for that long.
Wow.
And in my head, I'm just some random guy who talks about comics on the internet.
Yeah.
And to have that kind of connection is devastating. It's like, people paid attention. People really do care. And it's all because I showed them something of myself that they latched onto.
So was there moments where you was doing this, whenever you're starting something online and you're putting stuff out there into the world, that no one's watching?
Absolutely.
No one's looking.
Yeah.
Was there moments in there that because the audience weren't there, you considered maybe stopping or doing something else?
Writing feels so good to me. Like I joke that writing well is difficult, but writing is as easy as breathing. And like I take such pleasure in like writing a review or a critique or even just like, doing a portfolio review for someone that even if no one read them, I would still be doing them. I just have like a notebook at home, they find after I'm dead with 500 reviews or something like that. Like if you can find satisfaction in your art, And I think it's harder the more physically laborious the art is. Like for artists, it's very difficult sometimes because you can get lost in the physical pain that comes from drawing. Writers, it's a little bit easier. But if you can find that joy in your art, then you don't really need anybody else. I mean...
Tell me more about the physical pain.
Oh, yeah. Drawing is an ergonomics nightmare.
Okay.
So generally you should draw like sitting up straight, like you should have like a table and you're like this. Even then, like humans are not, our bodies are not meant for that.
We didn't evolve to necessarily draw, did we?
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, because we're very good at it. And I have a lot of friends who have different chronic, back pain, carpal tunnel.
Neck pain,
Yeah, there are people who, like, when they hold a pencil, it's almost like this,
Okay.
I'm making like a very cramped hand symbol right here. And it's all because you hold your pencil in one spot for hours and hours, and it's just your arm going back and forth, and it's just repetitive stress. So a lot of artists now are like gym rats. You'll see them at the gym, like running, lifting things, and it's because they need that extra strength. They need something to balance the art side of things. Being a writer is unhealthy as well, but it's more like a romantic unhealthy. Like it's, a guy with a bottle of whiskey and a typewriter, But drawing is genuinely one of the things where I'm like, this is the hard part of the comics industry. Like writing is very difficult, but like there's an extra layer to actually making the art that makes the stories go that you have to respect and have to take into account while you're working. Yeah, I would hate to like make someone's life worse just because I wanted to make a good comic book.
Okay.
So I try to keep that in mind where it's like if I'm writing a story, I want it to be something that all of us share. I don't want to be like, I never say my comic. It's always our comic.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important.
Yeah, it's a collective thing, isn't it, that you're putting together. It isn't just one person that puts the whole. If it is one person,
which is beautiful. I think that's also
beautiful.
perfect.
That does happen, but it happens rarely.
Yeah.
Because there is so many different elements and so many different skill bases that are going into this. So, David, at this point, I really appreciate you joining me for this conversation. But I'd just like to wrap this up with tell me a little bit, lastly, about your comic that you're about to launch and where we can find it.
Absolutely.
Let's do the marketing bit now.
So the best comic you'll read this year.
The real talk is starting now.
Yeah. So it's called Time Waits. But it's published by DSTLRY, so you can find it in any comic shop online, or any comic shop in person, and then also online at distillery.co. DSTLRY. They left the vowels out because it's cool. And essentially, our story is a very classic genre story. It's a man who escaped from a life and is pulled back into it. You've seen it in John Wick. You've seen it, there's Bruce Willis movies. It's like one trick that always works. And for us, our approach is our hero, our main character, escaped from the future. Like he was a guy who would, essentially, he's from a post-climate change future, and he comes back to steal resources. And he's like, this isn't right. Like we're ruining the past doing this. So he stays. He finds a life. And also, this is all issue 1. I'm not spoiling anything. This is all set up. He stays. He finds a life. He gets married. He settles down. And then the future comes back to haunt him. And our story is basically what happens to him when his past comes back. And it's been really fun. Like the feedback on the first issue has been all about like the pacing. I think we did something pretty cool there with the flashbacks, layering those things. And the character work we've been doing. We really wanted to make it a small town crime drama, even though it's a sci-fi story. So it's not set in New York City. It's not set, in like a space-age laboratory. It's a small town. His wife is the sheriff, and she can't, go to the cops for help because technically that would be pretty bad. My husband is from the future. Like, come on. So we explore a lot of these little things, like personal bits on top of the violent bits, that I think make it pretty fun.
So, as a comic book lover, if I'm into adventures,
yes,
this is the kind of book for me.
I think so. If you like movies like Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat. Looper was another good time travel one. We're not like those. We're doing something completely different intentionally. But we want to bring that same kind of fun energy where it's like, this is a story you kind of know, but we're going to tell it in a way that will make you like sit up and pay attention.
Wonderful.
And
sounds great. I look
Marcus
forward.
Toe and Matt Wilson drawing and coloring. Amazing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for sharing, David.
Yeah,
I really do appreciate it. We'll put links to the comic in the comments below if anyone wants to find out more or take a look and read. And if anyone was watching or listening into this conversation, we appreciate you for joining us. Thanks again, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Bye-bye.